It had been years since the quiet days of his life began. James, a former soldier turned engineer, had spent the last few years living away from the galaxy's turmoil. After his time in the war, he sought peace on a quiet planet far from the grand struggles of intergalactic politics. It wasn't much, just a modest home surrounded by forests and mountains. He had nothing left but his memories, which he kept locked away. Among those memories was the face of a girl, a blue-skinned alien he had saved long ago. That day was something James would never forget. He had been just a soldier at the time, part of a peacekeeping mission on a distant planet. The girl had been caught in a raid taken from her village. When James found her, she was terrified and wounded, but she held on to life. Against all odds, he managed to get her to safety. They had spent weeks together, and during that time he learned of her people, an ancient species of blue-skinned aliens who lived in peace, only to be crushed by a ruthless empire. Over the years, James had wondered what had happened to her. He had tried to move on, but he never could forget the girl with the soft eyes, the one he had saved, the one who had changed him in ways he never fully understood. On this day, however, his quiet life was interrupted. James was working on a new engine design in his workshop when a loud crash echoed outside. The ground trembled beneath him and a strange sound filled the air, a sound he didn't recognize. He rushed to the window, his heart racing, and looked out. There, lying in the field near his house, was a spacecraft, half buried in the earth. It was an alien ship, unmistakably foreign. Without a second thought, James grabbed his coat and rushed outside. His mind raced with questions. Could it be an accident? Or was it something more? As he approached the wreckage, the air grew tense, the sky above darkened with heavy clouds. He carefully stepped around the debris and made his way to the open hatch. Inside the ship, everything was still, too still. And then he saw her. She was standing near the center of the wreck, her back to him, her long blue hair flowing like liquid in the dim light. The moment she turned to face him, his breath caught in his throat. It was her, the girl. But this was not the same frightened, broken alien he had saved all those years ago. Her face was harder now, no longer the soft innocence he remembered. Her eyes, once filled with gratitude and vulnerability, were now cold and sharp, like the eyes of a warrior. Her blue skin shimmered in the dim light, and her body was covered in a black armored suit. Unlike anything James had ever seen, she looked different. She looked powerful. "James," she said, her voice cold, commanding, and full of authority. He froze. How do you know my name?" His voice trembled despite his attempt to remain calm. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped forward, her movements deliberate. "I've come to ask for your help," she said, but there was no warmth in her tone. Her words felt like a demand more than a request. The familiarity of her voice, the face he had once fought to protect, was still there, but now it was wrapped in something new, a strength he had never seen in her before. James couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, and that change was more than just the passage of time. "You saved me once," she continued, "and now I need you again." James's mind raced. He remembered how vulnerable she had been back then. He had promised himself that if he ever saw her again, he would protect her no matter what. But this was not the same girl. This was a warrior, a leader. And from the look in her eyes, it was clear that she wasn't asking for help out of kindness or gratitude. She was here for something much bigger. "Why?" he asked, his voice more forceful now. "Why do you need me? What happened to you?" She met his gaze with a piercing look. "The world I knew is gone," she said, her voice filled with a quiet fury. "The empire that destroyed my people is still out there. I fought for years to keep my people alive, but now, there's only one way to stop them. And I need your help to make it happen." James felt a chill run down his spine. He had known she was from a war-torn world, but he hadn't realized how much it had changed her. The girl he had saved was no longer here. In her place stood someone with a mission, someone who wasn't afraid to do whatever it took to win. "You're not the same," James said softly, more to himself than to her. The woman stared at him, her expression unreadable. "Neither are you, James," she said, her tone icy. "The time for kindness is over. The time for mercy is gone. I need your skills, your knowledge, and I will not take no for an answer." James stood there, stunned. The blue-skinned girl he had saved was back, but she was no longer asking for help in the way he remembered. The world around him had changed, and now he would have to decide if he was willing to step back into that dangerous world, or if he would let the woman he once knew continue her path alone. The silence between them stretched as James tried to make sense of what was happening. He had known that the galaxy was a place of war, of constant battles between factions and empires. But this was different. The girl he had saved all those years ago, she wasn't the same person. She had changed, and so had the world around her. He stood there, unsure of what to do. His mind raced, memories flooding in. He remembered the gentle way she had smiled at him back then, how grateful she had been for his help. But now, the fire in her eyes was unmistakable. It was a fire that burned with a desire for power and control. "You saved me once," she repeated, her tone almost cold, but with an undercurrent of something else, something he couldn't quite place. "And now I'm asking for your help again." James shook his head. "I don't understand. Why me? Why come to me after all this time?" She took a step forward, her boots crunching on the gravel beneath them. The ship behind her was now half crumbled, the wreckage smoking faintly, but she seemed unaffected by it. Her focus remained entirely on him. "Because you're the only one who can help me," she said, her voice steady but firm. "You know how to fix things, how to make broken technology work again." James frowned. The last time he had worked on anything that needed fixing, it had been back in the military. He was no longer a soldier, no longer someone involved in such matters. He had tried to distance himself from the war, from the violence. "I'm not that person anymore," he said quietly. "I'm just trying to live a quiet life now. I left all that behind." She didn't flinch. Instead, she regarded him with a gaze that was unyielding, like a warrior seeing past his words to the core of who he was. She stepped closer, her presence overwhelming. "You can't hide from who you are, James," she said, her voice softening just slightly, but with no less determination. "You have the skills, the knowledge, and now my people need you." James took a deep breath. He had wanted to leave that part of his life behind, but the truth was he couldn't completely escape it. The skills he had learned, skills he had once used in battle, were still a part of him. And no matter how hard he tried to deny it, he knew deep down that those skills would always be needed in this dangerous galaxy. "I can't be a part of this," he said, shaking his head. "I'm not the hero anymore. I'm not some soldier looking to save anyone." The girl's eyes darkened, and for the briefest moment James saw a flash of frustration in them. She stepped back and looked out over the horizon, as if gathering her thoughts. Then she turned back to him, her face harder than ever. "Then, let me remind you of something," she said, her voice lowering but still carrying the weight of command. "When you saved me, it wasn't just because you were a soldier. It was because you cared. And you still care, whether you want to admit it or not." James felt a pang in his chest at her words. He hadn't forgotten what it felt like to help her, to save her from the horrors of the war she had been caught in. But that was years ago. He wasn't the same man anymore. "I don't have a choice in this, do I?" he muttered, more to himself than to her. The girl didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into a compartment on her suit and pulled out a small metallic device. It was sleek and unfamiliar to James. She held it out to him. "This is the key to ending the war," she said. "It's an ancient piece of technology that could turn the tide for my people. But it's broken, and only someone with your skills can fix it." James took the device from her, feeling its weight in his hand. It was like nothing he had ever seen before. The technology was alien, something far beyond his understanding, and yet he felt a strange connection to it, as if the device itself called to something deep inside him. This device is the key to everything, she continued, her eyes fixed on him with an intensity he couldn't ignore. The galaxies, empires will fall if I can repair it, but I can't do it alone. James looked at the device, then back at her. The weight of her words settled in his mind. The girl he had once known, her people were in danger, and now it seemed that their survival depended on him. She wasn't asking for help out of desperation. She was asking because she knew he was the only one who could give it to her. Why? Didn't you come back sooner? James asked, a sense of betrayal bubbling up in his chest. Why wait until everything has gone this far? The girl's face hardened again. Because my people have been fighting this war for years, and I couldn't bring myself to ask anyone for help. But now we're out of time, and you're the only one I trust. James didn't know what to say. His mind was spinning with questions, with doubts, with the old memories of the girl he had saved and the war he had tried to leave behind. But one thing was clear. His past had caught up with him, and no matter how much he wanted to stay out of it, he was being pulled back in. You don't have to trust me, she said, as if reading his thoughts. But the galaxy's future depends on what you do next. Will you help me? James stared at the device in his hand, feeling the weight of it, both physically and metaphorically. It was more than just technology. It was a decision. A decision that could either lead to peace or to greater destruction. He looked up at the girl, no, the woman before him. She had changed, yes, but so had he. And deep down, he knew that whatever happened next, he couldn't turn his back on this. I'll help you, he said, his voice steady though his heart raced. But I need to know everything, no more secrets. She nodded, a faint trace of gratitude crossing her face. You'll know everything, James. I promise. James sat at his workbench, staring at the device in his hand. It was small, sleek, and unlike anything he had ever seen before. Its surface was smooth, almost otherworldly, with glowing symbols etched into the metal. As he turned it over, trying to make sense of its design, the memory of the girl, no, the woman he had saved so many years ago filled his mind. The quiet, frightened girl he had rescued was gone, replaced by someone far more dangerous, far more focused. She had come to him with a purpose, and that purpose, he now realized, was more than just fixing a broken piece of technology. She had come for a weapon capable of changing the balance of power in the galaxy. James leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. The weight of the decision pressed on him. She had given him no choice, at least that's what she'd said. But was that true? Could he really trust her? He had saved her life all those years ago, but now she was asking him to help her destroy the very thing he had fought to protect. Peace. A sudden knock on the door startled him out of his thoughts. He stood quickly and walked over, his mind still racing with the implications of what he had agreed to. When he opened the door, the woman stood there, her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. I've been thinking, James said, his voice low. I need to know more. I need to understand what you're really asking me to do. The woman stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. She was imposing, her presence filling the room as soon as she entered. She had changed so much, and yet, in some ways, she was still the same. Her blue skin still shimmered in the light, but her eyes, those eyes, were hard now like steel. I told you everything you need to know, she said, her voice steady but with a hint of impatience. The galaxy is in chaos, James. If we don't act now, my people will be wiped out. This device is the key to our survival. James held up the device, his fingers tightening around it. It's not just a key to survival, though, is it? He asked. You want to use it as a weapon. You want to use it to destroy the empire that has been hunting your people. The woman's gaze never wavered. And what's wrong with that? The empire doesn't care about us. We've fought for years, and they've only become more ruthless. This is the only way to stop them. James felt a knot form in his stomach. She wasn't wrong, but something about her determination unsettled him. She had become something he hadn't expected. Something darker. I'm not sure I can be part of this, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't sign up for war. I left that life behind. She took a step closer, her eyes locking onto his. You're not just a soldier anymore, James. You're an engineer. You have the knowledge to fix this. And more importantly, you have the skills to help me control it. Without you, my people don't stand a chance. James lowered his gaze to the device in his hand. He knew she was right. He had the skills. He had always been able to fix things even when the problem seemed impossible. But this was different. This was something far bigger than just fixing a broken piece of technology. This was about life and death. This was about the future of an entire species and the cost of that future. You're asking me to help you win a war, James said slowly, his voice full of doubt. But what happens after you win? What kind of world will your people live in then? The woman's eyes softened for a moment, but it was brief. She was a leader now, not the scared girl he had once known. I don't know, she said, her voice quiet for the first time. But we'll figure it out, we have to. James swallowed hard, his heart heavy. He had always believed that there could be another way, that peace could be achieved without more bloodshed. But now, staring at the device, he wondered if that hope was nothing more than a fantasy. The war had already been raging for years, and now the girl he had saved, the woman she had become, was asking him to help end it. Is this really the only way? He asked, his voice almost pleading. Is there no other way to stop the Empire without becoming like them? The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a deep breath and looked away, her expression unreadable. James watched her, waiting for an answer that never came. Finally, she spoke. There's no other way. I wish there were. But there isn't. James closed his eyes, the weight of her words settling on his shoulders. He had been running from this conflict, this fight, ever since he had left the military. But now, it seemed like there was no escaping it. The war had followed him, and the blue-skinned girl he had once saved had brought it right to his doorstep. I'll help you, he said, his voice resigned. But I need to know everything. No more secrets. If we're going to do this, we do it together. The woman nodded, her expression softening just slightly. I promise you, James, no more secrets. As James looked at the device in his hand, he couldn't help but wonder if he was making a terrible mistake. The price of old favors had always been high, but this might be the highest price of all. James sat on the edge of his workbench, staring at the device that lay before him. It was almost as if the small metallic object had taken on a life of its own, its power pulsing silently in the dim light of his workshop. The woman, the girl he had once saved, had left him with little choice. She had insisted that he repair it, that he help her turn it into a weapon that could end the war once and for all. He had agreed, but doubt still gnawed at him. He had told her that he wanted no part in the war, that he had left that life behind. But now, sitting here with the device in his hands, he knew that leaving it behind wasn't as easy as walking away from a battlefield. He could hear her footsteps approaching, sharp and determined. He didn't need to turn around to know it was her. The air in the room shifted whenever she was near, her presence commanding, her confidence unwavering. He wondered if that was how it had always been with her, if the quiet girl he had once helped had always carried this strength inside, her just waiting to be unleashed. You've made progress, she said, her voice cool but tinged with approval. James didn't look up. It's complicated. This thing, and it's far beyond anything I've worked on before. I can fix it, but it's going to take time. She stepped into the room, her blue skin glowing faintly in the low light, and crossed her arms. Time is something we don't have, she said bluntly. Every day we waste, the Empire moves closer to crushing my people. You promised me you'd help. James finally looked up at her, meeting her piercing gaze. She was no longer the frightened girl who had been saved all those years ago. She had become someone else entirely, someone capable of great things, but also someone who was willing to sacrifice everything to achieve them. The problem was, James wasn't sure if that sacrifice included him. I didn't sign up for this, you know, he said, his voice rough. I didn't ask for a war. You didn't ask to save me either, she replied, her tone sharp but not unkind. And yet you did. You're not the same man you were when you rescued me. You've changed, and so have I. But that doesn't change the fact that we need each other. He clenched his jaw. She was right. He wasn't the same. He had seen too much, lost too much, and learned that peace wasn't always something you could simply walk away from. Sometimes it was a fight, and sometimes it required doing things you never thought you'd be capable of. I never wanted to be a soldier, James said, his voice quieter now. But I was. I fought in wars I didn't believe in, for reasons I couldn't understand, and when I left I thought I could finally live a life that meant something. But now you're back where you started, she interrupted, her voice filled with an edge of something almost sympathetic. We're both back where we started. You've been trying to run from this world, but it keeps pulling you back. And me. I've been fighting for my people since the moment you helped me escape. I can't stop now. James stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor as he pushed it away. He walked over to the window, looking out. At the distant mountains, the wind was picking up, the trees swaying gently. It felt peaceful out there, so different from the storm that raged in his mind. He couldn't escape this. He had known that from the moment she had arrived. The war had followed him, just as it had followed her. There was no running from it, no hiding away in the quiet life he had built. Not when the fate of so many depended on him. I know what you want, James said after a long pause. You want to end this war. But at what cost? You're not the same person anymore. You're willing to use this device, this weapon, to destroy your enemies. But what happens after you win? What kind of world will you have built with all this power? The woman walked toward him, her steps measured, and paused a few feet away. Her eyes softened for the briefest moment, and for just a heartbeat, James saw a glimpse of the girl he had saved all those years ago, the girl who had been kind, vulnerable, and full of hope. I don't know, she admitted quietly, her voice almost a whisper. But I'm willing to find out. My people are dying, James. I've seen my friends, my family, fall. The Empire will not stop until we're all gone. If this is the price of saving them, then I'll pay it. James's heart twisted as he listened to her words. He had never imagined that this would be the person she would become. She was a leader now, a warrior, unapologetically determined to do whatever it took to save her people. And that, he realized, was the same determination that had driven him to save her all those years ago. But now the stakes were higher. This wasn't just about one life. This was about the fate of an entire species, and the price of that salvation was steep. I don't know if I can help you with this, James said, his voice thick with emotion. But I'll try. I'll finish what I started, even if it means facing a war I never wanted. She nodded, her expression softening just a little. I knew you'd understand. I couldn't do this without you, James. As she turned to leave, James stared at the device on the workbench once more. The choice was clear now. He had already stepped into a world he couldn't escape. But what would it cost him? What would it cost them all? The future of the galaxy was uncertain, and with each passing day, James felt the weight of the decisions. Ahead of him, he had saved her once. But now the question was, could he save her people, and at what cost? James stood at the workbench, staring down at the device. His fingers ran over its smooth surface, tracing the strange symbols that still seemed to dance in the dim light of the room. It had been days since he had agreed to help her, since he had agreed to repair this strange weapon. Days that felt like weeks, full of tension and doubt. And now, it was ready. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The device was complete, its mechanics fully restored, its power core humming quietly. All that remained was one final step, the activation, and that he knew would change everything. He looked over his shoulder where the woman stood, watching him carefully. Her eyes were filled with a mix of expectation and impatience, but there was something else there now, something that hadn't been there before, a sense of uncertainty. She had wanted this, She had demanded this. But now that it was here, ready to go, James saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice quiet but firm. "Once we activate it, there's no going back. This device, it's not just a weapon, it's a key to power, to a future that could be destroyed just as easily as it's built." The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer to him, her footsteps slow and deliberate. She was not the frightened girl who had needed his help years ago. She was a leader now, a warrior who had fought for her people's survival. And yet, for a brief moment, James saw a flicker of the same uncertainty he felt. "I didn't ask for this," she said, her voice softer than before. "None of us did. But my people are being wiped out. We've fought for years, and we're losing. Every day, more of us fall. I didn't ask for power. I asked for survival." James's heart tightened at her words. He understood. He could feel the desperation in her voice. Her people were dying. And now she had come to him, the man who had once saved her, to do what she could not do alone. But he couldn't shake the feeling that they were both walking down a path that could lead to more destruction than salvation. "I didn't ask for this either," James replied, his voice steady. "But I'm in it now. You're right, I promised I'd help, and I will. But you need to understand that this isn't just about saving your people. It's about what happens next. After the war. After the device does what you want it to do. Can you live with the consequences?" The woman's expression hardened again, her eyes filled with determination. "I can't afford to think about what happens next. My people need this. They need this victory." James nodded, though he felt a pit form in his stomach. He had always believed that victory, when achieved at any cost, had a price. He had seen it in the wars he had fought in. He had witnessed how easily a battle won could turn into a war lost. But he wasn't sure she saw it that way anymore. The girl he had once saved was gone. In her place stood a commander who would do whatever it took to protect her people. He reached for the activation panel, his fingers hovering over the controls. The device was ready. But was he? "What if we're wrong?" James whispered, almost to himself. "What if this doesn't bring the peace you think it will?" The woman stepped up behind him, her presence like a weight pressing on his back. "There's no peace left, James," she said quietly. "There's only survival." Her words sent a chill down his spine. He had heard it before, in the darkest corners of every war, when there was no hope for peace, when all that was left was survival. And survival, more often than not, meant destruction. He had seen it too many times. Taking a deep breath, James finally activated the device. The air in the room seemed to shift, humming with energy. The symbols on the device glowed brighter, the hum growing louder as the power surged through the core. The woman stepped back, her face filled with anticipation. "It's done," James said, his voice heavy. For a moment, there was silence. The device pulsed with energy, but nothing happened. No explosion, no sudden burst of light. It was as though the device itself was waiting for something. Then the woman spoke, her voice shaking slightly. "Now we wait. The Empire will come. And when they do, we'll be ready." James turned to face her, his heart sinking. She was right. The device was ready to be used. But he couldn't shake the feeling that they had crossed a line, one that they could never return from. "Are you sure about this?" James asked again, his voice tight with uncertainty. The woman met his gaze, her eyes unwavering. "I'm sure." James nodded slowly. He had made his choice. He had helped her, just as he had promised. But in the end, he wasn't sure what he had really helped create. Peace, power, or something else entirely. As the room settled into a tense silence, James couldn't help but wonder if they had just set in motion a chain of events that would lead to an even greater conflict, one that no one could control. The days that followed were filled with tension. The device sat silently in the corner of James's workshop, its hum now a constant reminder of the power it held. The woman, now more determined than ever, had insisted that they prepare for the inevitable. The Empire would come for them. It was only a matter of time, and when they did, the device would be their weapon, the key to ending the war. But as the days passed, James couldn't shake the growing sense of unease. He had made a decision, yes, but he had no idea what the true cost would be. Would it be worth it? Would they succeed, or had they just unleashed something far worse than they could control? He sat alone in the workshop one evening, the glow of the device casting long shadows on the walls. The woman was gone, preparing her people for the coming battle. James had tried to convince her to wait, to think about what they were doing, but she had refused. She was too sure of her path, too certain that this was the only way. But James wasn't sure anymore. The device had given them power, yes, but it had also created a dangerous new world. What if this wasn't the solution? What if the Empire was just the beginning, and this power they had now would lead them down a path of even greater destruction? As he sat there, deep in thought, he heard the soft sound of footsteps behind him. He turned, his heart skipping a beat when he saw the woman standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "I thought you'd be in the field with the others," James said, his voice tinged with surprise. "I was," she replied, stepping into the room, "but there's something we need to discuss." James nodded, setting the device aside. He had been avoiding this conversation for days, hoping that somehow it would work itself out. But deep down, he knew it wouldn't. He couldn't ignore the weight of what they had done any longer. "What is it?" he asked, bracing himself. "I've made up my mind," she said, her voice firm. "We're going to use the device. We're going to end this war, once and for all." James's stomach turned. He had known this was coming. He had known that she wouldn't back down, but hearing it out loud made it feel all the more real. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Once we use it, we can't take it back. The Empire will fall, but what happens after that? What kind of world are we creating?" She met his gaze, her eyes hard. "The Empire is a cancer. It needs to be destroyed. My people deserve a future, James, a future where we're not constantly fighting for our survival." "I understand that," James said, frustration creeping into his voice. "But what about the cost? What happens when the dust settles? What happens when the war is over? Will we have anything left?" The woman's gaze softened for a brief moment, but it was gone almost as quickly as it had appeared. "I can't worry about that now," she said. "All I know is that we can't keep living in the shadow of the Empire. We have to fight for something more." James stood, his hands clenched into fists. He knew that he had made a choice when he agreed to help her. He had known that helping her meant more than just fixing a device. But now, standing here in this moment, he realized how much had changed. The girl he had once saved had become a leader, someone capable of making impossible decisions. And in some ways, so had he. "Are you willing to risk everything for this?" he asked, his voice filled with emotion. "Are you willing to risk your people, your future, for the sake of this victory?" She looked at him, her eyes narrowing as if measuring his words. Then she stepped closer, her voice soft but unwavering. "We've already lost so much," she said. "What's left to lose?" James felt a sharp pang in his chest. He had never wanted this. He had never wanted to be caught in the middle of a war. And he certainly hadn't wanted to be involved in a battle that could destroy everything they had worked for. But here they were. And he was a part of it now. He had made a choice. Whether he liked it or not, he was in this with her. "I'll help you," he said, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "But I need you to understand something. This power, this device, it's not just a tool, it's something far bigger. And once we unleash it, there's no going back." "I know," she said, her tone soft but resolute. "But sometimes you have to burn everything down to rebuild." James didn't reply. He couldn't. He wasn't sure what else to say. He had helped her build this device, and now they were standing at the edge of a precipice. The next step they took would determine everything, and deep down he wasn't sure they were ready for the consequences. The woman turned to leave, her footsteps echoing in the room. As she reached the door, She paused and looked back at him, her eyes meeting. His once more, "Thank you," she said quietly. "For everything." James watched her leave, his heart heavy. He didn't know if what they were doing was right, but he couldn't change it now. He had made his choice. And now, they would have to face whatever came next. The air felt heavier. Now. The tension between them had reached a boiling point, and James could feel the weight of the choices they had made. The device they had activated was ready, and the moment they had been preparing for was fast approaching. The woman, his old friend, the girl he had once saved, was no longer the same person. The war had transformed her into someone resolute, a leader willing to do anything to secure victory for her people, but James wasn't sure if that was a good thing. The device hummed softly in the corner of the room, a constant reminder of the power they had set in motion. The woman was busy preparing her forces for the final battle, rallying her people with the promise of victory. But as James sat alone in the workshop, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far worse than they realized. "James, are you ready?" Her voice broke through his thoughts, calm but carrying an urgency that couldn't be ignored. She stood in the doorway, her armor gleaming in the dim light, her eyes focused, determined. He looked up, meeting her gaze. "I don't know," he admitted, standing up from the workbench. "I'm not sure anyone's ready for this." She stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "We don't have the luxury of waiting anymore. The Empire is already on its way. We have to act now." James felt a deep sense of unease settle in his chest. He had always known this moment would come, but now that it was here, he realized just how little control they had over what would happen next. "You're right," he said, his voice low. "But I'm not sure we're in control anymore. We've got a weapon, yes, but I don't know what we're going to do with it once we've used it. We can destroy the Empire, but what happens after that? What happens to us?" The woman's expression softened for just a moment, but it quickly returned to its usual intensity. "I've thought about that too," she said quietly. "I can't promise that everything will be perfect after this is over, but I can promise that we'll have a chance to rebuild. My people will have a future. That's all I can hope for." James nodded, but doubt still gnawed at him. He couldn't help but wonder if this was the only way, or if in their desperation they had done something irreversible. "I never wanted to be a part of this," James said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to live a quiet life. But I'm here now, and I can't walk away." The woman's gaze softened just a little, and for a fleeting moment he saw the girl he had once saved. The girl who had been frightened, vulnerable, and unsure. The girl who had trusted him. "You're here because you care," she said. "You always have, and that's why I need you." James didn't know how to respond. He had cared for her once, and he still did. But everything had changed. The war, the device, the people they were fighting for. It all felt like it was spiraling out of control. He glanced at the device again, the glowing symbols on its surface now pulsing in time with his racing heart. It was powerful, far more powerful than anything he had ever worked on, and with that power came the possibility of unimaginable destruction. "Are we doing the right thing?" he asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. "Are we sure this is the only way?" The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked over to the device and placed her hand on its surface. For a moment she just stood there, her fingers lightly brushing the cool metal. "We don't have a choice," she said finally. "The Empire has destroyed everything we've ever known. My people are dying. If we don't fight back now, we'll be wiped out. I've seen it happen before." James stood beside her, watching her hand on the device. He understood the weight of her words, but something in his gut told him that there was more at stake here than just survival. The device was a weapon, but it was also something else, a symbol of what they were willing to do to win. "What happens if we win?" James asked softly. "What happens after we've destroyed the Empire? Will we be any better than they were?" The woman turned to face him, her expression hardening once more. "We won't be like them," she said firmly. We're not fighting for power, James. We're fighting for our future. We're fighting to survive. James felt a knot form in his stomach. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that this was the right thing to do, that they could rebuild after the war, that their people could live in peace. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that peace wasn't something they could just create by destroying their enemies. Peace was something that had to be earned, through understanding, through compromise, and through sacrifice. The woman's eyes softened again, and for a moment, he saw a glimpse of the girl she had once been. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't a leader. She was just someone who wanted to protect the people she loved. "I wish there was another way," she said quietly, her voice almost breaking. "But there isn't. Not anymore." James didn't know what to say. The path they had chosen was set. There was no turning back. But as they prepared for the final battle, he couldn't help but wonder if they were truly ready for the consequences. The room was silent for a moment, the hum of the device filling the air as the two of them stood together. They were on the brink of something big, something powerful, but at what cost?